Carlos Montoya squinted against the fading New Mexico sun as it dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and deep oranges. Roswell was coming alive, but not in the usual way for early December. This wasn't about holiday lights strung across storefronts or families gathering for Thanksgiving. This was something else entirely, a strange blend of holiday cheer and eerie fascination with the unknown. The annual UFO festival had merged with an early Christmas market, creating a bizarre celebration with its own odd take on Thanksgiving. Stuffed alien figures decorated every corner, some even dressed as turkey hybrids, while neon green lights and flashing UFOs gave the whole town a surreal glow. Carlos didn't need a mirror to know he looked out of place among the festive revelers. He still wore his work coveralls, the pockets heavy with spare bolts and washers, fingers stained with oil despite scrubbing them twice. His truck had refused to start again, adding another annoyance to a string of troubles that stretched back for years. But his presence wasn't a matter of choice. He was here because Isabella, his 16-year-old niece, had begged him to come. "It's just for one night, Tio," she'd pleaded, her eyes shining with excitement he couldn't ignore. She was all he had left of his brother, and he owed her this much. As he walked through the bustling streets, he could feel the tension that pulsed beneath the festive lights. Families and festival-goers strolled past decorated booths selling holiday trinkets, a blend of Christmas ornaments and extraterrestrial souvenirs, like little green men in Santa hats and tinsel-draped UFOs. It was both cheerful and unnerving, a surreal reminder that Roswell had its own unique way of celebrating the season. "You gonna join the fun this year, Montoya?" Carlos turned to see Mason, the festival's head organizer, dressed in an oversized elf costume, with a glowing UFO pinned to his hat. Mason was Roswell's biggest fan, a walking billboard for the town's alien lore. Carlos managed to smile. "Maybe next year. I got work." Mason shook his head with a chuckle. "Work? Come on, Carlos, it's the UFO festival and Christmas to boot. Besides, you deserve a little break after the year you've had." Carlos swallowed down a bitter reply. Mason didn't know the half of it. People talked about him, how he'd gone dark after his brother's disappearance, how he'd buried himself in the bottle, and how he was finally getting clean. But no one mentioned it to his face anymore, and he preferred it that way. "Not tonight," he muttered, pushing through the crowd, eyes scanning for Isabella. Each year, the festival attracted thousands. Alien enthusiasts eager to relive the town's famous 1947 crash, their imaginations blending with holiday cheer in strange, mismatched ways. "I believe" signs glowed red and green, and inflatable UFOs hung with string lights floated above stalls selling turkey-shaped alien plushies. A giant Christmas tree decorated with metallic baubles stood in the middle of the street, surrounded by UFOs on a model train. The scene was equal parts festive and surreal, but Carlos's mind was on his niece. Isabella had inherited her father's restless spirit, the same curiosity that got David into trouble. He could see it in her eyes, her fearless curiosity, and it filled him with a strange mix of pride and worry. She was a smart kid, but Roswell had its shadows, and he knew better than most what happened when you followed the wrong lights in the dark. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glancing at the message. "Isabella, meet me near the big alien statue at the park. I found something weird. You gotta see this." A chill ran down his spine, sharpening his unease. Weird wasn't a word she'd use lightly, not after what their family had been through. The memories stirred, memories he tried to keep buried, of late nights and his brother's disappearance. He thought of the scent of sage that always lingered around David, earthy and sharp, and it suddenly felt like he could almost smell it now, weaving through the cool desert air. Quickening his pace, Carlos wove through the crowd, pushing against the festive throng of holiday revelers, past stalls selling alien-shaped gingerbread men and booths of silver and blue holiday wreaths. Each step seemed to thicken the air around him, his nerves tightening. A man he vaguely recognized caught his eye for a moment, nodded, then quickly turned away, disappearing into the crowd. Carlos's chest tightened, the feeling of being watched gnawing at him. The park lay just on the edge of the festivities, shrouded in shadows as the noise of the festival faded behind him. There, beneath the towering statue of a gray alien, its arms outstretched as if in welcome, stood Isabella. Her arms were folded, her usual bright smile absent, replaced by a pensive frown. "Tio," she called, her voice low and uncertain, "come look at this." Carlos approached, feeling a strange weight pressing down on him. The air here was cooler, heavier, as if the world itself was holding its breath. "What did you find?" he asked, glancing down at the ground where she pointed. Etched into the dirt near the statue's base were strange geometric symbols. Too precise to be random, their sharp lines and intricate patterns seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. "Who did this?" Carlos murmured, crouching to get a better look. Isabella shrugged, her face pale. "I don't know, I just found it. I thought it was part of the festival, but it feels different. It's like I've seen them before." Carlos reached out, hesitating, his fingers hovering just above the strange markings. A faint buzz seemed to hum from the symbols, resonating up through his arm like a low, eerie note. The air around him carried a metallic scent, sharp and cold, like the scent after lightning struck. He brushed his fingers against one of the lines, and a jolt shot up his arm, biting and cold, as though he'd touched a live wire. Carlos yanked his hand back, stumbling. His chest tightened, breath turning ragged, air too thick, too heavy. The world lurched, shadows stretching and shifting in jagged shapes across the desert floor. For a heartbeat, everything blurred, the ground wavering like a mirage. "Tio?" Isabella's voice cut through the haze, her hand steadying him. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," he lied, rubbing his hand on his jeans, trying to shake the tingling sensation that had settled into his bones. "We should go." They walked quickly back toward the festival lights, the distant sounds of music and laughter filtering through the trees. But Carlos's mind was on the symbols, the strange hum that still lingered under his skin, echoing like an unshakable melody. As they moved away from the park, he looked over his shoulder one last time, his gaze lingering on the statue. The symbols lay etched into the ground, cold and unmoving, but something about them had shifted. He could feel it, like a presence that watched, waiting. Then as he turned back to the lights of the festival, he caught sight of something that made his breath hitch. A faint light hovered just above the horizon, too low, too bright to be a star. It flickered slightly, hanging there as if tethered to the edge of the world. "What is it, Tio?" Isabella asked, following his gaze, her voice edged with curiosity and something deeper. Fear, perhaps. Carlos stared, his mouth dry. The light held, suspended, then shivered, its edges pulsing like something alive. It moved ever so slightly, an unnatural sway, and a low, resonant hum drifted toward them, barely audible but vibrating in his bones. He swallowed, unable to tear his gaze away. The light hovered, unblinking, watching. David and Isabella. Carlos hadn't dreamt like this in years. He stood barefoot on a cracked expanse of desert, the sand around him so fine it sparkled like powdered glass beneath a dull red moon. The sky hung too low, pressing down on him like a lid over a boiling pot. It was familiar and foreign all at once, as though he'd been here 1,000 times, and yet never. The air hummed. A deep, resonant vibration that settled in his bones, like the earth itself was alive and breathing under his feet. Ahead of him, David stood in the same spot he always did, looking up at the sky. His brother's back was to him, unmoving, as if he were carved out of the desert itself. "David," Carlos's voice cracked, the sound swallowed up by the endless horizon. No response. He could never get closer. No matter how many steps he took, David remained the same distance away, just out of reach. Carlos's heart raced, his chest tightening as dread settled in. He knew what came next. The light, the stars above pulsed faintly. No, not stars. He saw it now. Eyes wide and unblinking, staring down, each one fixed on him. They weren't watching David, they were watching him. A gust of hot wind whipped across the desert, carrying with it the faintest scent of burning. The sand shifted beneath his feet, and Carlos froze, his breath catching in his throat. The sky felt heavy, pressing down on him like a weight he couldn't escape. His skin prickled and the sensation of being watched intensified, growing into a suffocating pressure. And then it came. The blinding, unnatural light. Too bright, too sharp, as if it could peel the skin from his bones. It was a light that came from nowhere and everywhere, radiating down from the sky and rising up from the ground. David turned slowly, his face expressionless, eyes glowing with the same pale light. Carlos stumbled back, his breath shallow, heart pounding against his ribs. He wanted to scream, to reach for David, but his body felt frozen, paralyzed with fear. His throat burned, the words stuck there, desperate to break free, but his voice was lost. The light grew brighter, sharper, cutting through the darkness like a blade. Then the hands came. Long, spindly hands reached up from the sand, cold and smooth like marble. They wrapped around his ankles, their grip tightening, pulling him down into the earth. The desert swallowed him whole, the ground softening like quicksand beneath his feet. He tried to move, to fight against it, but the more he struggled, the faster he sank. The hands pulled him deeper and deeper, the light fading into a distant memory as darkness swallowed him. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Only the light. Carlos woke with a start, gasping for air. His apartment was pitch black, save for the thin strip of moonlight sneaking through the blinds. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, his heart still hammering in his chest. The dream, the same damn dream, had returned. After years of pushing it down, burying it with booze and regret, it was back. Clawing its way into his mind like it had never left, he sat up, the heavy scent of grease and motor oil still clinging to him from work. His hands trembled as he reached for the glass of water on his nightstand. He hadn't touched a drink in months, but nights like this made it tempting, made him think that just one would settle the gnawing in his gut, make the dreams go away. But he knew better. They never went away. Carlos lay back down, staring at the ceiling, his mind drifting to the past. David's disappearance, the endless nights wondering if his brother was dead or something worse. Every day since then had been a battle to stay afloat, to keep from drowning in the guilt. He'd failed his brother, he'd failed David, and now these dreams, these damn dreams, were dragging him under again, pulling him back into the same suffocating darkness. He closed his eyes, trying to push it all away, but the images clung to the edges of his mind. David, the light, the hands. He didn't sleep again. By the time the festival kicked into full swing the next evening, Carlos was already running on fumes. The previous night had left him rattled, the dream replaying in his mind like a broken loop. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw David disappearing into a darkness that seemed to swallow the air itself, a hollow silence where his brother had once stood. He'd spent the day at the garage, hoping the steady hum of engines and the smell of oil would drown out the memories, but the work only kept him busy, not distracted. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was reaching out from the past, pulling him back into its cold grip. Now, as he walked through the crowded streets of Roswell, the festival's noise and chaos only seemed to sharpen his unease. Holiday decorations mingled with strange UFO-themed lights, bathing the town in an odd, otherworldly glow. Oversized tinsel-wrapped stars hung alongside neon green wreaths and "I Believe" banners. Turkey-shaped alien plushies were scattered throughout the vendor stalls, alongside strange hybrid decorations like Christmas trees topped with small UFOs. Roswell had always reveled in its alien lore, but this was something else. People were dressed up as little green men, some even in Christmas elf hats, laughing and shouting, the whole town caught up in the strange festivities. To them, it was all part of the fun, a holiday spin on Roswell's favorite story. But to Carlos, it was a reminder of everything he'd lost. The lights, the decorations, the costumes, they felt grotesque, a caricature of something darker, something people didn't understand. His phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. Isabella. He opened the message. "Meet me by the funhouse near the edge of the fairgrounds. I found something." Carlos frowned, his pulse quickening. "Found something again," he muttered under his breath. "Seriously, Issa?" Isabella had always been curious. Too curious. Ever since she was little, she'd been the one wandering off at family gatherings, poking around in places she didn't belong, asking too many questions. But this? This felt different. There was an urgency in her tone that worried him. What could she have found now? He weaved through the crowd, his nerves on edge. The festival was chaotic, and the idea of her wandering off to investigate something strange gnawed at him. Was she pulling some kind of prank, or was she in real trouble? A knot of unease twisted in his gut, tightening with every step. The closer he got to the funhouse, the thicker the crowd became. People in neon green wigs and alien masks brushed past him, oblivious to his growing panic. Carlos pushed through them, his mind racing. The streets were full of life, noise, laughter. But all Carlos could feel was the hollow echo of his brother's disappearance years ago. It was happening again. He knew it deep in his bones. The memory of that night hit him like a wave. David had been laughing by the fire 1 minute and gone the next. 1 second, they were brothers, sharing a quiet camping trip under the stars, and then David was gone without a trace, swallowed by the dark. Carlos had scoured the desert for hours, his voice growing ragged and raw as he shouted David's name into the empty night. His throat burned with each call, cracking until his cries faded to hoarse whispers. The cold air stung his lungs, and his legs ached with every step across the rough, unyielding ground. But still, he kept going, pushing through the darkness, desperation clawing at his chest. But David had never come back. Not a sign, not a clue, just emptiness. He shoved his way through the last of the crowd, his heartbeat in his throat. The funhouse towered ahead, the neon lights casting strange shadows across the fairgrounds. It was quieter here, away from the main festival, the noise of the crowd fading into the distance. Carlos glanced around, scanning for Isabella, but the pit in his stomach only deepened. She wasn't there. His phone buzzed again, a second message from her number. "Meet me behind the funhouse, it's important." Carlos clenched his jaw, a sense of dread curling around his chest like a vice. Something was wrong. Isabella would never be this vague. She always told him where she was going, what she was doing. This felt off, like a trap he couldn't see. He moved quickly toward the back of the funhouse, the colorful lights dancing ominously in the dark. The funhouse itself stood like a relic of the past. An old, creaky structure that had no place in the modern festival. Its painted clowns and twisted mirrors faded and chipped with age. He turned the corner and stopped dead. The back of the funhouse was deserted, empty, not a soul in sight. Carlos's chest tightened, his breath coming in shallow, quick bursts. He scanned the area again, desperate for a glimpse of Isabella, her dark hair, her blue jacket, but there was nothing, just shadows and silence. "Isabella," he called out, his voice echoing in the stillness. No answer. He dialed her number, pressing the phone to his ear, his heart pounding in his chest. The line rang once, twice, then cut to voicemail. Carlos cursed under his breath and dialed again, but it was the same. Voicemail. She was gone. His mind raced, panic clawing at his thoughts. What if this was like David? What if this time it was happening again? He tried to force the thought away, but it wouldn't leave. The memory of that night was too strong, too real. "No, not again, please, not again," he muttered, his voice cracking with desperation. He felt like a trapped animal, pacing back and forth, his eyes scanning the empty space around the funhouse for any sign of her. The festival was a blur of flashing lights and distant laughter fading behind him. In this forgotten corner of the fairgrounds, Carlos stood alone. Isabella was gone, vanished without a trace. Just like David, his phone vibrated in his hand again. He looked down at the screen, his pulse spiking as he saw another message from Isabella's number. "Help me!" The knot of fear in his gut tightened. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't her playing games. She was in danger. "Where are you?" Carlos texted back, his fingers trembling, but no reply came. Carlos stared at his phone, his pulse pounding in his ears as the world tilted around him. His worst fear had come true. Isabella was gone, vanished without a trace. The festival's lights winked eerily in the distance, casting long shadows that seemed to shift with his unsteady breath. Carlos's hands shook as he looked down at the screen. It was another message from Isabella's number. His thumb hovered over it, his gut twisting with dread. He didn't want to open it, but he did. The words stared back at him, cold and unyielding. The light. That was all it said.
Still with us? Thanks for listening. You've just experienced Chapter 1 of Curse of the Greys, the Roswell Rift. One of 6 eerie tales from 6 haunting fates, a collection where human fears unravel across realities. From a digital doppelganger and a denim-obsessed ghost, to a cursed bayou, mirrored selves, and love that defies death. Curious to discover what happens next? Follow the link in the description and dive deeper. If you dare. Cheers!
I see the stars burning bright above, but they don't light my way, no, not enough. Chasing shadows running through the sand. Gotta find her, gotta take my stand. David's gone, but I'm still fighting. Every step feels like thunder, lightning. Can't shake this weight inside my chest. The rift ain't sealed, no time for rest. Through the rift, out tonight. A hero's fall or a hero's fight. I carry guilt, but I carry hope. Holding on tight to the fate and down the road. Through the rift, through the dark. With every beat, I'll leave my mark. The home still echoes, won't let me be. Ghosts and shadows calling out to me. The girl is lost, I feel her near. In the space between life, chase the fear. I hear the grace whisper in the night, telling me that this ain't right. But I can't stop now, I've come too far. Chasing dreams under these cursed stars. Through the rift out tonight. A hero's call or a hero's fight. I carry guilt, but I carry hope. Holding on tight to fate and down the road. Through the rift, with every beat, I'll leave my mark. I see your face brother through the haze. Lost in time, lost in space, but I can't save you, can't turn back. Gotta keep pushing down this track. This fight ain't over, but I feel the end. One last breath before we bend. I might be broken, but I'm still here. The desert hero, trying to